Welcome to Business on Purpose, the podcast for hardworking entrepreneurs who drive our economy. I'm your host, Barrett, and as a sales leader and business owner, I understand the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. Each episode, I am interviewing business owners who have faced the same struggles you have. Low revenue, a lack of scalability in their sales force. Together, we're going to explore their entrepreneurial journey and uncover the valuable lessons they've learned along the way. From mentors to advice, we'll dive deep into what has helped these business owners get unstuck and move forward towards success. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned entrepreneur, the podcast is for you. Be sure and follow and subscribe to this podcast as we learn from the experiences of successful business owners and navigate the road to entrepreneurship together. Let's get started. Chris, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing great. How are you,
Good.
Barry?
I'm doing well. So those of you who don't know, Chris Price, he is with Madison in Indianapolis, Indiana. He is one of my clients and asked him to come on the show. And he can come from a unique place because he does business development and sales in the nonprofit world. And there's a lot of misnomers about nonprofits in my experience. And it's not lack of profit, I like to say. It's a tax code, but so many people in the nonprofit world struggle with doing business development and sales, and therefore they have a hard time with their nonprofit, not doing the work, but getting the funding for the work. So Chris, welcome to the podcast, and I really appreciate you being on.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. So let's get started really quick. I want to know how you got your start in your business.
That's a good, interesting question. My uncle actually started the business back in 1988. So Uncle Gary started the business, and then when he was nearing retirement in 2008, so he had a good run, but it was nearing retirement and was looking for his succession plan. So he had already started working with a childhood friend of mine, Scott Grimes, who he knew through our family, and he was looking to retire. So he had mentioned to me and to Scott that, Chris, if you would like to come into the business, there's an opportunity. I'm wanting to get out in the next couple of years. And I had a unique background that aligned with his business and with his clients, as did Scott, and we were both kind of complementary. So anyway, long story short, I started in 2008, and in 2010 was able to buy the business. The idea that Gary had was that if we were able to take on more of a leadership role in the company and with our clients and having success with that, then he would feel comfortable with selling the company to us. I was really fortunate to have that opportunity. Most people don't have those connections or have those kind of opportunities fall in their lap. So I was very fortunate.
Let me ask you, I know he's your uncle. Did it fall in your lap, or did you show up as the right person, therefore he gave you a shot?
I don't know. I guess in hindsight, yeah, we were definitely the right people for the job. But certainly having that connection and having that opportunity was important. I think just being in the right place a lot of times is a big part of it. But we were very successful. Gary started the business in 1988 and was a one-man shop for a very long time, and had an assistant for a while. And by the time we bought the company, we were at 5 employees. And so Scott and I have really taken a different direction. We've had a lot of success in growing the business beyond where we were.
Yeah, that's good. I think about it, lucky and getting mentors, and that's probably my next question. But growing up, me and my brother, we didn't have much. We went and worked in tobacco, and that's tobacco for you northern people, and on farms and with just these people. And then we played basketball and sports growing up. And that was the lucky part. It was lucky to be good at sports. And we had a mom that said, you're going to work. Like, that is going to happen. And so we went and worked for these folks. And I remember a guy named Jerry Pierce. He was our principal. He was the dad of somebody on our basketball team. And this guy would pay for us to go to basketball camp every year. And then we would work it off in tobacco. And then he would still pay us. So I think he was losing money here in this deal. But I think mentors show up that way, and luck. The right person and you're doing the right things, you will get lucky, in my opinion. So would you say Gary's your first mentor? And if so,
it's a good question. Your story is real similar to mine in a lot of ways. So when I was growing up, I wanted to play golf. I was introduced to golf in like 7th grade but we were not a golf family. We didn't have the money to pay for that golf membership
Yeah.
and to do all that stuff. There was a golf course and Clearmont Golf Course. It no longer exists, but it was a rough golf course, but it was near where I grew up. It was a par 3 course, basically a cornfield where they put some flags down. But I couldn't afford the membership. And so I had talked with that owner of the golf course. His name was Jim Ware, a football coach at Decatur Central High School, and just kind of a hard ass. But I talked to him and said, I would love to be a membership at this fine establishment, but I can't afford it. Is there anything I can do to get a job or something where I could earn free golf? And I was 14 and he said, sure, we could use the help. And so that was my first job. And hearing you talk about your mentor, Jim was probably my first mentor. He really taught me hard work. That was the biggest thing. There was no one that worked at that course who was under the age of 60 other than me.
Mm.
Every bit of hard work, every drain tile that busted, everything that required manual labor, every hole that needed dug, that was me. And
I
so,
love that.
yeah, Jim was a very hard worker too, and led by example and taught me a lot. But really, I don't think I ever would have made it through Purdue's engineering program if it wasn't for that hard work ethic that he instilled in me during those days.
There's a quote, a saying in business, and I love it. And I think I heard it from Tony Robbins first, but it's not the lack of resources that holds people back. It's the lack of resourcefulness.
Yeah,
And that hard work, that resourcefulness, that ask, all you got to
yeah,
do is ask. Successful people want to help you. I think about
yeah,
my son, he's big into golf. He's a +2 handicap at,
yeah,
18 years old. What I've always been afraid that he's not going to have that. We talk about it a lot and he rolls his eyes at me a lot, but he does work hard. There's a different way when you do have resources that I think you can parent to get people to pick up on that. But it's a lot easier when you just don't have them. And
yeah,
necessity is the mother of invention.
yeah.
So I love that story. I didn't know that. So that's really
Well, and it
fantastic.
was, as a 14-year-old, I wouldn't have known how to approach that conversation either. To walk in there and talk to these people who were intimidating to me and to be vulnerable and say, I don't have any money, but I want to play golf.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for my dad. And,
What did he do?
the what?
What did he do? Like, how did he get you to push that?
He just coached me on how to have that conversation, what to say. We practiced before I walked into the clubhouse and talked to Jim, and it worked.
Yeah, we teach in sales. We teach practice, drill, and rehearse all day, and that's what you did. That role play. People hate role play, but it's
Right.
so effective, is it not?
Oh, yeah. So important.
That's
Yeah.
good. So it sounds like you had a lot of people. You had a dad in your life that was able to help you. Your uncle. You were able to ask. That's interesting. And so you started this business, or you bought the business from your uncle, right?
Yeah.
So now of course, you have a business. You had a business partner at the time, Scott, right?
Yep.
And you guys started the business. What was in specifics to your revenue or your sales? Where did you get stuck? What was one of your challenges?
We had some challenges early on because Gary wanted to retire and he knew what he needed to retire. So
Mm-hmm.
he had a dollar amount in mind for selling the business that was not what the value of the company was. The sales price was what he needed to retire. So
Yeah.
we paid a premium for the business just for the opportunity to own a business. Now, we were successful. Still are extremely grateful for that opportunity, but obviously I would do it if I had that opportunity, I'd present it again. But early on, we had to be very careful with our cash flow. We met every Friday and looked at our just expense by expense. Scott and I would meet and look at everything. And if we weren't managing our business and managing our profitability, we would have gone under during that purchase period. So
Yeah.
it was over a 5-year period where we bought the company from Gary. And in that first year, I'll say we were really as we were looking at the finance, we discovered we had 2 clients. They just so happened to be our biggest pain in the ass clients, but they were our least profitable clients. And one of our clients we were losing money on. Gary had set it up in a way that it was a flat fee billing, but we were working twice the amount of what we should have on that client. And it was already one of those things where, man, I had a stomach ache every time I'd meet with this client. It was a lousy client. So Scott and I made the decision that we were going to talk with these 2 clients and say, we this is what we are worth. This is what our services should be billed at. We can work over the next 3 months to get you to that point. But if we can't be compensated fairly, we can't continue to work for you. That was a difficult decision because a company that's lean on revenue, being intentionally making the decision to cut off revenue sounds like a stupid decision, right? But it's what we did.
Yeah.
And neither one of those clients decided to stick with us. So we basically fired those two clients. And then we did have to make some overhead changes too, and had to let go of an employee to make sure that we were balanced on our revenue and our expense.
Yeah.
But that decision set us up to invest in the clients that were profitable. And so our strategy changed around that time. We decided that, hey, here's the clients that value us. We can earn good money with these 4 clients. So let's just continue to add value and develop new programs that will create more demand for our services. And so that was our strategy that we took, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And around that time, and this was only like a year into our purchase agreement, we began growing. And we've continued to grow. We've been growing. I looked at it about 6 months ago, and we've been growing on average 18% year over year, every year since 2008. So it's been a pretty steep growth trajectory.
That's good. So one of the things in the South we talk about, I got all kinds of Southern sayings, but you got to raise the bridge or lower the water. And really in most companies, you can raise the bridge and lower the water. The bridge is revenue, the water's expenses. And so many people think it's an either or, and you guys did both. You raised the bridge and you lowered the water of expenses.
Yeah.
And we talk about top grading. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it, letting go of the bottom 20% of clients and then adding the top all the time and just top grading. Moving your 50% in the middle to the top 20 or getting rid of them. And I think that's where you had a big success, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So where's your business today?
Today, it's interesting. So we've continued to grow. If you look at our path of how we've been growing, we've consistently growing from 2008 till about 2000. And in 2015, we developed this niche around workforce development. And I guess a niche of our company is that we're pretty inventive. When we see an opportunity or see like a challenge that an industry has or that a customer has, we tend to create solutions, create new programs, things like that. So we tapped into workforce development and creating some workforce programs back in 15, and it was successful. However, what we were finding was our company was growing and we were growing quickly, and we still had me and Scott who were doing everything, running the business, but also serving our clients. And it was a pretty critical time where we knew we needed to invest something in our infrastructure to support that growth for us to continue. Just serendipitously, we had been involved in an organization called Indiana Society of Association Executives, a networking group, education group for nonprofit executives. And we knew a guy named Rob Riggs. He was the executive director for Phi Kappa Theta, which was a fraternity. We had no experience managing fraternities.
Yeah.
However, we knew Rob and valued him. And we had heard that Phi Kappa Theta was looking for an association management company as a solution. And I approached Rob, had breakfast with him at Cracker Barrel, and we talked about what they were looking for. And at that time, that client is great. Would love to manage them as a client. It was interesting to me to develop a services division that would focus on fraternities and sororities because we didn't have that experience. So I viewed that as a potential future revenue source for the company. But what was really interesting to me was that we needed that infrastructure to support our growth. And Rob was and is an operational minded technology person, which really wasn't where Scott or I were. We were doing it, but it wasn't our comfort zone. So we just laid it on the table, or I laid it on the table, like, we would love to manage Phi Kappa Theta. We'd love the opportunity to work with you. But most importantly, what we'd like to do is bring you on into our leadership team and bring you on as an equity partner.
Yeah.
And so we looked at the revenue we were bringing in and just applied it to equity in the company. So we got this client, and that added so much equity to the company, and we gave that stock to Rob. So it was an investment in our future, of a net neutral acquisition.
Yeah. Good. I love that. And then now you've invested
And so, yeah, that kind of taking that a little further, we were able to, that positioned us for our next level of growth and for our
Mhm.
trajectory and where we're at now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So what are you doing today to continue that scale?
So shortly after we brought Rob on, that was when we connected with you and with
Okay.
EOS. But what we found we needed to do was really focus on developing out all the seats, all the accountabilities for sales and marketing, for operations, for finance, for all the all those things that are critical for a business to grow. The infrastructure is what I call it. We had to shore up our infrastructure in order for us to grow our building taller. I'm in
Oh yeah.
construction, so I always use those metaphors. But using EOS, we were able to build out that team, and it wasn't all me and Scott, and it wasn't all me and Scott and Rob. So we were able to engage other employees in some of those key seats that we needed to fill. And where we're at now is we've got an accountability chart. We've got everything defined in sales and marketing and finance and operations. And we're pursuing other acquisitions, other association management companies so that we can continue to grow beyond Indiana and beyond the construction industry. I think like where we're really at, we've got a pretty heavy accountability chart. We've got a lot of people who are, if I'm really honest with where we're at, we've
Mhm.
got a lot of people who are spending part-time filling these seats while they're also doing full-time work. And looking at our next iteration, where we're probably needing to go in the future, is to invest in some more full-time people to fill some of these positions rather than full-time swatting at some of these
Yeah.
things that we're doing.
And we've talked about it a lot. When you start adding people, they should either do one or two things. They should either add revenue to your bottom line, your add revenue to your top line, and it should free up your time. It should really do both when you add
Yeah.
anyone.
Yep.
And from a revenue perspective, what have you done in the last 6 months to a year to really help increase and drive your revenue in your sales force or your business, those types of things?
Yeah, we've done a few things. So the gamble on fraternal services has paid off. We've secured a couple new clients and who were fraternities. We're in the process of merging with another company or acquiring another association management company. They're
Mhm.
called Synergos. They've got an office in Minnesota and then one in Indianapolis. Bringing that company under our umbrella, that's an investment in our future. They've got other clients like they're involved in industries beyond what we're traditionally involved with. So it adds some diversity to our resume. And I'm sorry, what was that? What was that
So
original question? I'm in a rabbit hole.
you're okay. Rabbit holes are okay. So what have you done the last 6 to 12 months to really drive revenue? I know you've made an acquisition, so that
Yeah,
adds revenue. So
yeah, adds revenue and expense. Our revenue is growing, and a lot of what is driving that is our fraternal services growth, and then our workforce development niche. We've added a lot of revenue and staffing around in both areas, really.
Mhm.
So that's driving most of
Now
our
I
growth
know
right
that you've engaged in sales training. So tell
now.
me specifically how that's gone. How does that help? What are they doing to help you the most? What look like?
Yeah, that was an interesting adventure because, or venture, I guess I should say, because in the nonprofit world, maybe any world, people are afraid of sales or there's a negative connotation with sales. I don't get it. I've got a background in sales. That's what I did prior to this. But
Yeah.
yeah, we had in that workforce development space the opportunity to fill construction training classes. For every person in a class, that would generate revenue, and that revenue would go to the client, and then that revenue would support our operation. That's what pays the staff.
Mhm.
Our What we were finding was some of the enrollments were declining. We all know that there's labor shortages, workforce shortages, there's things like that. It's harder to find people to fill the jobs. We were experiencing that same thing with our training classes. There weren't as many people who were trying to get training so that they could pursue jobs in construction. And
Mhm.
so our classes that were traditionally filled with 20 to 30 people were getting around 6 or 7 people.
Mm.
And we were in trouble if we didn't do something different. So yeah, we hired a sales consultant. That company is called Lucian. They're a local company out of Indianapolis, and they helped just looking at the process that we had for sales and for recruitment for those classes, and they just helped apply uh, a better process. They improved that process, and then we began training our staff on that process, and it turned things around significantly. We went from around 6 to 8 people per class, and
Yeah.
now we're having record enrollments. We just had a class that was our biggest class ever in Gary, Indiana, that was 36 people, and that was a new location for us. We
And
really hadn't done much.
how many months did that take, that whole process of going from start to sales training to the end?
Yeah, and it's still going on. We're probably nearing the point where
Good.
we can wrap it up, but we had our process well documented within 3 to 4 months,
Hmm.
and we were starting to apply that. Now, our learning moments, even in month one, we were starting to see some improvements, like just
Yeah.
focusing, having some conversation around sales and recruitment. That
Hmm.
was making somewhat of an impact. But we also had to make an adjustment in some of that team leadership, which that adjustment also helped as well. We were able to help that team culture and embrace that sales and recruitment process. Where
Well,
if your leader's not bought into it,
that's right.
um, it's not
Well,
going to work.
so number one, you said people are afraid of the word sales. 4 years ago, I heard the word biz dev for the first time. And I've been in sales for 20 years. I've been training salespeople for, I think, 9 years at this point. And I thought when someone said biz dev, I literally thought it was the development of your systems and processes inside your business.
Yeah,
And then they told me it was sales, and I'm like, I guess that's a catchy way to say it.
yeah,
But I do believe Dr. Joyce Brother said that you cannot consistently perform at a level that is inconsistent with the way you see yourself.
yeah,
And if you don't see yourself as a salesperson and you're gonna ask for a price at the end, you're gonna have a hard time with that. And so the mindset of that, because you're selling, what's really interesting about what you're selling, you have two sides. Number one, you need to get the government to buy into investing in your program.
mhm,
That's a sales process.
yeah,
And then you get students who are not paying for it be interested in going into your class.
yeah,
And so it's crazy because, and I've thought about this for years. I've trained people who the business owner hired me to train their people, so the people weren't paying for it. And I've seen how it goes. If they want to learn, they're going to learn. If they don't want to learn, but if they're forced to be there, you're in trouble. And getting people to want to come to the class who aren't paying for it, they don't really have skin in the game except for time. Tell me about that process, and how's it different than selling to someone who's actually the check writer?
yeah. So it's the basic concept of our workforce development programs, and we started in construction. We're expanding into into the hospitality sector now, with a
Mhm.
different type of training. But the people that we serve are, typically, we hold the classes in communities that are affected by blight, by poverty, by high rates of homelessness and incarceration. We hold the classes in jails. We hold the classes in prisons. We work with people who have not traditionally found success,
Mm.
and haven't traditionally found success in a career. And so you've got people who've applied to the program, but they have that, I don't know if it's the word manifest destiny. I that where
Well,
they go
I
ahead. I know
know
you know.
manifest destiny is where is literally when we expanded the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Okay, so that's not the word I'm looking for. It's that.
No, it's when
Uh,
you manifest. So if they're afraid, is that the big part, that they're
well,
afraid of
what
something?
happens is people come into the class and they feel like they're not going to succeed, or maybe they come in hot and they feel like, hey, I can rock this out. I know everything there is to know about construction. But people come
Yeah.
at you in two different ways,
Hmm.
and it's those people that haven't found success that are going to be the most likely to not show up.
Hmm.
And so our sales process is different in that we really got to get to know the person over a series of 5 calls leading up to that class.
Yeah. I
We
think the
want to
word
dig
that
in.
you're looking for is self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's it,
Yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy. They
Yeah.
they feel like, yeah, and so
Uh-huh.
overcoming that self-fulfilling prophecy is our biggest challenge.
Yeah. So one of the things, I grew up very poor, and you know that I'm very fired up about your mission and your purpose. When you take people who seemingly are from a background of poverty, maybe it's prison, maybe it's a lot of those, right? But I had trouble with that, but mentorship is what got me through that. But selling the why, the big dream, getting them excited, is that the one of the big keys to overcoming the self-fulfilling prophecy?
It is absolutely, and then and giving them permission to say no as well as is another big part of it. So it's finding out their why, and then every
Mhm.
time we talk to them, we check in and just remind them of their why. Ask them if anything's changed. Do you still plan on coming to class? Are we still going to have our conversation next week
Yeah.
as a check-in before class starts? And just reminding them that it's okay if something does change and you don't want to take this class, but let me just remind you, this is why we're doing this and why you're signed up for it.
Mhm.
And that's pretty effective. So that's our strategy with our customer segment.
I call it philosophy. I use a big word for it. What is your philosophy, your life philosophy? Because what you believe about something is what's going to happen, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And you can't take someone from a single wide trailer on government cheese, and that's where I grew up,
Mhm.
to being really successful too fast, because it will scare them to death. And so you have to take people from being in prison. The next thing, the next stage is to be out of prison, right? You
Yeah.
can't just, that's a whole philosophy change for them. And then once you get out of there, you have to take another step in your philosophy. I'm never more comfortable than when I'm uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
love that,
Yeah.
because every time you get uncomfortable, but I also tell people, don't get 50% out of your comfort zone. Get 5% out of your comfort zone. Because if you try to get 50% out of your comfort zone, you're going to crash and burn. If you get 5% out of your comfort zone, you're good. So are you helping people get at least 5% out of their comfort zone in the way they think? Is that where you're going?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would say it's more than 5% is certainly what it feels like.
Yeah.
We've been really fortunate with that, especially with that workforce development program, and that we were able to secure a grant through the Lilly Endowment. That's Eli Lilly. They have an endowment.
Yeah.
And the funding that we received from the grant that we got was able to fund three what we call navigators or kind of career coaches.
Mm.
Two of them have social worker backgrounds. And our sales process on the front end, and our social workers are involved in the sales process. So we had to
Right.
train social workers to do sales.
Yeah.
But the value proposition or that their value continues after the program ends. That person coming out of prison is still working with our social workers, our navigators, to address those barriers, to get them out of their comfort zone and to see that they can be
Yeah.
successful in this. But it does take a lot of work, and we wouldn't be able to do this as effectively as we are without the help of that Lilly Endowment.
So there's the second side. So you've said, okay, here's how we sell people who aren't the check writers to attend our class. Now, how do you get people to write the check for that? And I misspoke earlier because I said government, but you guys get your money from government, private people.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
So what is there a difference in approaching the private market versus the government? And if so, how?
Yeah, not much difference. There's politics at play with both.
Yeah.
But no, especially in the private market, your outcomes, your performance, your track record are really important. There's some limitations in government where maybe they can't place a higher value on a higher performing program in government versus a program that may not be performing as well. So there's some differences, I think, but the reality of the programs that we've developed is they're very high performing. They're at the top level, exceptional performance criterion
Mm-hmm.
through the state. And so that's opened up a lot of doors. The fact that we do have all of our processes very well documented, working well, and we're seeing really positive outcomes for everyone that goes through our program. So it's that proven track record that's driving our growth right now.
I love that. Yeah, people, especially people in the private market, they want to see your measurables. If they're a really successful company, and only successful companies can fund your projects,
Yeah.
they are driven on data. I love to
Yeah.
say it, and you've heard me say it. It's math, not magic, and
Yeah.
facts do not care about feelings. So I really love that it's data driven, and when and you were able to go from 6 students to 30 students again, and making that huge impact, because that is really changing those people's lives, helping make them be productive citizens and participate in our economy. which we have the best economy that's brought more people out of poverty than anything else that I can even dream of. So there's three stages of business that we participate in, and we call them the startup phase, the growth phase, and the scalable phase. So what advice would you give someone that is in their startup phase today?
That's a good question. I'm actually a mentor to a group of PhD students and master's students at Purdue in their construction management program.
Wow.
We just completed, and basically what it is, through the Purdue Research Foundation, they're developing startup businesses. And so I just completed a program last week where I, as the mentor to the group, and the group, we completed an 8-week program to develop a startup business. It's through the National Science Foundation. It's called iCorp's training program. And so it's fresh on my mind. But the advice that I would give a startup is that most startups fail. You've got to minimize your risk. You might think that you've got a really good idea, but that's just a theory. And until you identify your customer base and you talk with your customers prior to really launching that business, you don't know if that business is going to be a success or not. It's like, with the experience that I just had, we had a startup business that we were hoping to launch. It was around an estimating software for the construction sector. We did 109 interviews over that course, and we developed 50 different hypotheses around what we thought our value proposition was going to be. But as we talked to our customers, we really couldn't identify what we called our beachhead market was going to be in order to launch that startup. So at the end of the program, we said, no, we're not moving forward. We need more research, more customer interviews in order to validate what we think would be a good business proposition. So my advice to a startup would be, get out and talk to your customers before you invest a bunch of money in your idea. And once you've got 100 interviews under your belt and you've talked to everyone that you can think of, and people are whipped up into a frenzy wanting to buy your product, then launch. That's just part of the risk mitigation that needs to go into a startup.
I don't know if I've told you my story a little bit about that, but I've never actually done anything before I've pre-sold it. So when I wanted to first start my sales training business, I just went and called a bunch of people that I know, love, and trust.
Yeah. Oh,
Say,
yeah.
hey, I'm starting a sales training company. Would you be interested in me training your people? And some people said yes. And I think they just felt sorry for me.
Yeah.
They said yes, and they paid, and I built it. And then I wanted to become an EOS implementer and went to my clients, and a few of them paid, and I went and got certified and started implementing with them. So it is really a great test. You did it one way. You made sure that the market was there and said, hey, you didn't ask them to pay. And I just asked them to pay it. And turns out people will. And then if they trust you, know, love, trust. You cannot ask people to prepay for something if you haven't built an amazing amount of value and trust before.
Yeah. And as you're talking to those customer segments, I think the terrible stories of startup businesses are when people invest a bunch of money or they take out loans on an idea that is not there. It's not validated. Being open to the fact that a no is a good response, I think is very important. If you're fortunate enough that you've talked to those customers and you're able to prove that you've got a good product, then great. Good luck to you. Owning a business is wonderful if you've got that business that's needed.
The research says that the more money you start with, the more likely you are to fail. Because it goes back to what I said earlier. It's not the lack of resources, but the lack of resourcefulness. And when you have $1 million to start a business, you don't have to be resourceful. You just throw money at problems, and that's not a good strategy. You start throwing people at problems. You got to be resourceful. I'd rather you hire too, honestly, I don't know if it's too late sometimes, but if you hire too early, I have a story. When I first started, I hired a guy, and his name was Bob. I love Bob. He was a little bit older gentleman, and I respected him. And about 40 days after he was working with me, I had to come to him and be like, Bob, I can't afford you anymore. And that was a terrible,
awful,
heart-wrenching moment for me. And so that's good. I love that. So now people are in their growth stage. What advice do you have now, their second stage of business?
Yes. And through one of our clients, the Indiana Construction Roundtable, we used to run a mentoring program for emerging businesses. And an emerging business is what I would consider for that growth phase. That's a lot of times companies go through a double hockey stick of growth. They'll
Yeah.
grow, they plateau, they grow again, they plateau. And that first growth typically happens in that first 1 to 3 years of their existence. So if you can get a solid mentor during that, especially during that first plateau, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important because having a mentor with business experience, they can help guide you to build out what you need for that second hockey stick, that second growth that you're going to experience.
At that stage, should you pay your mentor, or is it good to find a, because in your startup, I say find a free mentor. At that
Mentor.
stage, should you pay a mentor in your mind?
One way or another, you need to get a mentor.
Right.
Whether it's paid or whether it's not, it's important to have someone who's an expert. They need to be a business owner. They need to be a CEO. They need to be someone who feels the pains and the risks that go with owning a business.
Yeah.
If your mentor is a project manager, that's not going to cut it because they're not the ones who feel the same pains as that business owner. So
No.
whatever it takes to get that business owner or that person, even a consultant who understands business ownership,
Mm-hmm.
either way, at that point, they can identify what you really need to do in that growth phase is figure out where you fit in. What are you strong at? What's your weaknesses? And then surrounding yourself by people who complement you. You don't want a bunch of people who are the mirror image of yourself. You need the people who really are the opposites of
Yeah.
you so that you can do what you're good at, but you've got other people who have the accountabilities that may not be your biggest strengths. And it doesn't have to be full-time hires, doesn't have to be full-time people, but just making sure
Right.
that you've got a solution for all the things that you need in order to grow.
Yeah. That's it. I think paid or non-paid, but I love that you hit on it hard, is hiring people that aren't like you. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to get along with those people that are adding value because they're so different from you. Would you
Oh,
agree?
frustrating. Can be.
Yeah. You mentioned Rob, and I'm very familiar with you guys. Rob will put the stop on something that we're like, let's do this. And you need someone who puts the stop on stuff. That's so good. So now the scaling stage, what are you going to give the advice to someone who wants to scale their business?
And but still, it goes back to the growth phase, but just a little bit more for me. And I love using these construction references, but if you're going to make your building taller, if you're going to continue to grow your business, you've got to make sure that foundation can support the growth. If you just start adding stories onto your building without reinforcing your foundation, everything's going to come crashing down. And so that's where you're at in scalability. And I think that's the phase that our company's at right now, is that we're scaling up. We've gone through some of those growth phases and we've made investments in our future, but now we've got to build an even stronger infrastructure so that we know that we can continue to grow to where we want to be. By January, we'll be at 35 employees. Our 5-year goal was to get to 50 employees. We'll probably hit that 1 or 2 years early. And then the next 10-year goal was to get to 200 employees. And I believe that we'll be early on that goal as well. But where our focus now is that we've scaled to where we are, and just looking at that accountability chart, looking at everything that we have in place, do we have all the right people in the right seats so that we can expand the way that we want to?
Mm-hmm.
If not all the right people are in the right seats, then we can make some moves. We can adjust people. We can let go of people who are not those right people, right
Mm-hmm.
seats, and then truly invest in the best infrastructure that we can so that we can go to where we want to go to.
I love that. That's so good. I hate that we're running out of time because this has been so much richness for people. What's one last thing that you want to leave people with? If you were going to say, hey, this is the one thing I want to leave you with, what would that be?
Oh, that's a great question. Just to pay it forward, if you're a business owner and you're listening to this podcast, or you've been involved in EOS, as you see other businesses, even competitors who are trying to develop the same type of business as you, don't be afraid to help them.
Yeah.
I think that just helping the greater good, helping people, other business owners to connect to the resources that you had or some of the good fortune that you had, it is only going to help you in the long run. Being a mentor and paying it forward sometimes brings you back to those basics that maybe you'd forgotten about, like some
Yeah.
of those basic things that your smaller emerging businesses are struggling with can
Yeah.
just be a good reminder to you in your own business, so that whatever you give to others, it always comes back to benefit
Yeah.
you more in the end.
It's amazing. I work with leadership teams, I work with sales teams, and I get a front row seat to learning about businesses and how to grow different businesses, how to grow different sales teams, and how to sell different things by working there. And because I'm teaching a system of EOS,
Yeah,
and I teach a sales system. So it's not like I am a consultant to people. I
yeah,
just take your genius, your information, put it through my systems and help. And it's so important to teach people because you learn as well. And as you know, I have an automotive repair background, and people, I would tell them, I'm like, you need to go and get this training for learn how to run your automotive repair business. And we had 5 or 6 of them around us within, you could throw a rock and hit 5 or 6 automotive repair shops in this cul-de-sac we're in. And people say, why would you help them? Why would you want them to do this? And I'm like, because if I get them to do all the great practices, we literally we're not competing on price anymore. The
yeah,
best one wins. And
yeah,
so you can raise everybody up. Now I don't have to worry about price because everybody's charging a similar price. Now it's about the experience.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so I go out and try to help anybody I can. I have no competition. That's an abundance mindset. So I love that you said that.
No,
Chris, it's been an amazing talk. I would love to have you back on because I know there's so much up there in your brain that you could share and give value. Thank you so much for your time.
no, it's been fun. I appreciate the conversation as well.
Thanks a lot. Have a
All
good
right.
day, buddy. Bye.
See you.